You're listening to the Staff Room Podcast with Che and Pav. We talk casually yet poignantly about the most relevant topics in teaching today.
So come on and chat with us because we love to engage in great conversation.
Welcome to the summer series of the Staff Room Podcast. My name is Pav, and I make up half of the hosting team of the Staff Room, and I'm joined by my co-host here, and I'm not really sure of whether I should introduce him or not because I usually don't, but today feels a little bit different. Co-host?
I'm just like totally catching the waves, dude.
I love those waves. I was at the lake earlier this week with the kids, and the waves crashing on the shore were just so loud.
You took a lot of videos.
I did, and I posted a lot of videos. It was alarmingly loud.
So Pav, this is episode. Oh wait, no, it's not. This is summer series as we wave through the summer and have these series of great, poignant interviews from a variety of different teachers and educators highlighting a variety of very specific and different points. And then, we got in this debate. What are we going to do for the summer? Mm-hmm. We know we have the drive, and the drive is very robust in that Friday mornings, large audience, large global connections, and some really vibrant conversations. Mm-hmm. How would we, I hate using the word leverage something. I don't want to leverage something, but it sort of changes the dynamic of what the Staff Room Podcast should be over the summer months.
Yeah.
And we said, you know what, we can do an episode and we have all these great interviews. Is it too much content? Especially when you think of how much the world has changed, where last summer everyone was really locked down. And I think there's this summer of hope and an opportunity to make up for things people couldn't do. Are people around as often? Do they want as much audio content? So we sort of decided, why don't we focus our energies on the drive, on that Friday morning space, and then sort of fuse our interviews with maybe, 10 minutes of checking in with Che and Pav, which means checking in with Pav and having to deal with Che.
No, you're absolutely right, Che. And the drive really is that fantastic space. But I think that what we all collectively just needed this summer was a little bit of breathing room and a little bit of opportunity to reflect. So we are definitely throwing in some really great content over the summer. We've done some really fantastic interviews that have helped propel our thinking as we enter a new school year. So these interviews, which we conducted in June, and they're still ongoing as over the course of the summer, but they're really giving us some food for thought, some points to consider as we enter a new school year, some reflecting that we are continuously doing. And I think that that's really the value in having these great conversations over the summertime. So I'm really looking forward to not only having more of these conversations with educators, but also putting these conversations out into the world.
I love that you talk about reflect, because reflection, we've had this conversation before. Reflection is not growth. It's taking that reflection and saying, well, I actually have a gap here, or I have an interest here, or I have some curiosity here. And if I think of our entire journey, Pav, earlier on, there was so much to soak in. Mm-hmm. There was so much we hadn't realized was out there. Mm-hmm. And 2 years later, part of this journey has been constant accumulation of knowledge and wisdoms and experiences. So at the end, and it's not really the end, but are we at a point where we say we know it all? Actually, no, we're at a point to where we really know what we don't know.
Yes.
And can curate conversations that really propel us.
Yeah.
And all those conversations in the past have always propelled us. But going into this summer, you talk about how are you going to drive your personal PD? Well, a lot of these conversations are really conversations that we selfishly wanted to learn so we could bring it into the classroom for September.
Exactly. And if you think about our very first summer series conversation with Jason Toe, he talked about streaming in math and de-streaming or de-tracking in math, and how it trickles down to the elementary years. And I am thinking very intentionally now about whether or not I am subconsciously streaming in my class, as I'm teaching, and I'm thinking about, what am I going to consciously be doing, intentionally be doing in this new school year to make sure that I am not doing that. So it gives me something to think about and something to take back into the classroom. So I know that I take a lot of value from these conversations, and I'm hoping that everybody who listens does as well.
I think Jason almost made the argument, although he didn't explicitly said it, that it's not even trickle down.
Trickle up.
Can you trickle up?
Salmon going upstream. Yeah.
He commented that, we've been streaming in elementary because we had a great conversation that often elementary teachers don't worry about it. Well, we don't do the streaming. Mm-hmm. And he highlighted we do stream systemically, and who we stream into behavior classes, who we stream into IEPs. But he also made it even maybe even a little simpler in the idea of how much we do. You stream your kids based on where you put them in the classroom. You stream kids based on the activities you give. You stream kids based on the responsibilities and jobs you give within the class. And if they're not equally distributed, you're streaming. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a certain student that you've decided needs to sit in a certain spot, you've streamed them. Yeah. And he really put that out there so that you realize we are constantly streaming our children, rather than thinking it's the system that streams them into an academic or applied. But ultimately, we've already streamed them that have put them on that journey. Mm-hmm. And so it was a really rich conversation, really valuable.
Yeah, fantastic. And but we're not here to be talking about some of those other conversations right now. Today, we've got a fantastic conversation with Tim Stevenson from Langley, BC. And he's going to be talking to us about his experiences as a teacher, as a podcaster, as an author, and his journey through all of those things in his experiences as well.
His author journey is very unique, but also shared. Yeah. In this essence, is he really documents how he struggled. And I don't know if this the productive struggle, how he went out there and he had his vision and he had his mission and he had these stories and experiences he wanted to share, and how did he navigate that space of becoming a self-published author. And I think that's really valuable to sort of see how you can get your story heard, because I think we've all done great learning in identities and stories. So how do you formally share this story? And Tim, of course, has a very great resume. And, I realize I'm looking at my watch, like I don't even got enough years left in my teaching career to even amass this kind of a resume of accomplishments. So it was really fun to sit and talk with Tim about his teaching experience, but also his authoring experience.
Yeah.
Is this a good segue?
I think it's a fantastic segue.
Hold on. I got to do a commercial.
Oh, we got a commercial break in this little 10-minute episode.
I got to think of something. This episode, have I done this? Wait, have I done?
I don't think you have.
No? This episode is brought to you by Big Pens, because why would you not want a pen that could go in green, black, blue, and red with simply a... Whoa.
Click of the pen.
All right, everyone. Enjoy this episode and also enjoy The Drive live on VoiceHead Radio and chanpav.com/radio Friday mornings, 9 a.m. Eastern. Pav is wide awake, and I will be wide awake by 9:30.
Yes, join us, everybody, on Friday mornings. And thank you, and enjoy this episode with Tim Stevenson of the Summer Series. Welcome to the Staff Room Podcast. My name is Pav Wander, and I'm here with my co-host, Che Cheney, and you're listening to an episode from our Summer Series. We're speaking to some incredible educators that we've met along our educational podcasting journey over the last 2 years, and we're very happy to amplify their voices and stories and highlight the important work that they are doing in education. Today, we are speaking to Tim Stevenson, who is the host of the podcast Science 360. He is a Prime Minister's Award recipient, author, and astronomy teacher from Langley, British Columbia, Canada. And with him, we will be talking a little bit more about his book, Beyond the Classroom. We're looking forward to this conversation, so let's get right into it. Welcome, Tim. It's so nice to speak with you today.
Thank you very much. And I really am looking forward to this opportunity. I hear you guys all the time on the radio. On the radio, it is a thing. So now we get to see and talk to you face to face. Yeah.
We're so glad that you are joining us. And it's right, like the layers of how you connect via Twitter, via radio program. And now we finally do get to connect and talk and really dive into the layers of the work you are doing, because you do a plethora of great work and you are doing things that, are inspiring for Pav and I to sit back and watch your journey, your growth, your accolades. It's inspiring. It keeps us going. So we're really excited to get to have this conversation with you. We're really excited for our audience to get to know a little bit more about you. And I think that sets us up for, tell our audience a little bit about who you are. Pav mentioned some of the great things you've done, but what sort of led you in that journey, and sort of what were the things that were going on that made, the recipient of a Prime Minister Award, the writer of a book, the host of a podcast, all these great things. What's sort of behind that? To introduce yourself to our audience, we'd love to know. And then I'm taking notes because I'm hoping to be a Prime Minister Award winner I'll aim for 2045. 2045 gives me time to get ready.
Yeah, I'll hook you up. Don't worry. Oh yeah. So I'm a science teacher in Langley. I have been in the same school district in Langley, British Columbia for 28 years, and mostly teaching chemistry, junior science. In the last 18 years, I've been teaching astronomy. So I've developed an astronomy course, and that is a story in itself we can maybe get into. But I've always, you mentioned these things that on the outset of the interview here, and I've always been somebody who, I don't know, do I look for opportunities? Do they land in my lap? Do you have to be good to be lucky or lucky to be good? I don't know. But I've always been willing to say yes to almost anything that comes up. I was described recently, maybe a couple of years ago. A teacher said to me, what I noticed about you is you think about something and then you just do it. And it's true. It became a bit of a running joke last year here in my household. My son and I were talking about the COVID shutdowns and what's going to happen in September. And the report in the news said, well, the government officials are looking at it. They'll have an answer in 6 weeks. And I thought, what, are they all standing around a circle looking at the table and going, well, I see we've got a decision to make. How about 6 weeks from now? Whereas I guess my fault or my strength, I don't know which, is I don't tend to look at it. I tend to think, there's a cool idea. We ought to do that. So how are we going to get it done? And if we can get it started this afternoon or tomorrow at the latest, I'm happy with that. And I think that's something that everybody I think that's I'm in the minority, I think. But if more people did that, they'd accomplish some big things as well.
Yeah, you're right, Tim. I think that you are definitely a doer just because of everything that we see that you're working on, and we're so intrigued by your book, Beyond the Classroom, and we know that you have all of these great experiences that have helped to lead you to this book. But what was it? The big inspiration, the big why? How did you decide, I'm going to write this book, and what were some of those experiences that you wanted to make sure that you included as part of it?
I have to say that, and I'll tell you, if I had a chance to talk to new teachers all over the world, I would just love the chance to, because I did something when I was in my second, maybe third year of teaching that I just think everybody should do. And I got inspired by, quite frankly, probably by a bunch of motivational speakers. I listened to a lot of audio tapes in the 90s, and I got inspired to start to put together my ideas about what education can be. And I describe it in the book. I would go out into the living room before sunrise. Everybody is still asleep at the time. My two oldest boys were just little guys, and sometimes my oldest Josh, he'd come out and sit on my knee. He'd be maybe 2 or 3 years old, and I'd have a pad of paper, and it'd be a nice quiet room and one light on, and I just start thinking, and I just start writing, and I just, really wanted to compose for myself what I was going to be as a teacher, what I thought education could be, what school could be, what do students need, what are they really looking for when they come to school? Why is there this disconnect between school and kids? Why do kids say school sucks? Why are kids writing poems like "No more teachers, no more books, no more teachers, dirty looks," and all this? What is like? Who wrote that poem? That's a horrible poem. Um, why did it get to that point in life where they're writing silly things like that? And I wanted to sort of figure out for myself that whatever I was going to do in my career, kids weren't going to write that poem about my class. And so anyway, I spent weeks with pads of paper, and I was just writing. And I just think this is one of the greatest things any new teacher can do is write out what it is that you really think you believe education is. What are you going to do in your classroom? What are you going to bring to your students? How are you going to interact with them? What's the relationship going to be with them? How are they going to move forward from your class? Are they going to say at the end of your course, "Well, I'm glad that's over"? Or are they going to say, "Dang it, it's over? We were just getting warmed up"? And so anyway, I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And honestly, at the end of several weeks, I had this thick stack of papers. Easy for me to say, right? A thick stack of papers. And I thought, this is kind of like a book. And so I decided to type it out. And I pulled out my 22-pound laptop of the mid '90s, and I started to type it in MS-DOS, and it was kind of my book. And I called it "Because They're Worth It." And then I printed it at Staples, and I had it, and honestly, like, I always thought I'm going to come back to that one day. And now here, 28 years later, I came back to it. Well, I guess last year, February 2020, I came back to it and I said, I'm going to rewrite this thing because now I'm at the other end of my career. What do I think now? What have I learned over the last 28 years of teaching as it compares to what I wrote back then? And I started to write, and out of it came this book, and I called it Beyond the Classroom, because I really think that's what I've attempted to do in my career, is take what I do beyond what kids expect the classroom to be. And I just go anecdotally. I'm not a academic researcher, but I hear what the kids tell me, and I'm happy with what I've been able to do, and I've written it down. And I think that document that I wrote in the early '90s, as it turns out, I wouldn't have known this at the time, but it turned out it molded, shaped, guided me for my entire career. And it was probably the single most important thing I ever did as a teacher was write that period of time all that I needed to get off my chest and out of my head.
Tim, that's a really great story, really great anecdote to be able to go back to what you wrote and then compare it and use it to make a new text. Like Pav and I often joke that our podcast has value because it's a place where we can archive our thoughts, but it only goes back a year or two to have such rich documentation of where you were. Because I go back and I think, well, I think I knew what I thought 20 years ago, but I don't. You had that in text, you had that written format. Even as a teacher, I think you're advocating just, document your thoughts, write your things down, because you can come back and reference it and you can sort of see your path and your journey. And that reminded me to your first point. You were talking about lucky to be good or good to be lucky. And it was like trying to construct a linear path where maybe there isn't a linear path. And I think a lot of what you stress is it's about being different. It's about taking chances. It's about not passing up on an opportunity. And linear thinking is sort of for our simplicity of understanding. But there's almost like that quote, good to be lucky, lucky to be good. Who knows what order it comes in? And maybe it doesn't matter if there's an order to come in. And then that reminded me right to the beginning, you said you developed a course. And I was thinking all these pieces already sort of fit back into this narrative, going out, taking chances, doing something different. And maybe I'll deviate from the question, because the question we want to talk about that idea of being different, but I make that connection back to developing your own course. I can think of my own process, and I wouldn't say I've ever developed anything. It's a lot of following what's given to me, following expectations, following curriculum, even being inspired by ideas. So I was just thinking this whole theme you have of being different. And one, you model that in the idea of I had all this stuff written down from when I began 28 years ago, or I can edit that and say 15, however you want to, pretend whatever your age is, we can modify these things, we can make these changes. But that this theme of being different, How important is this a message that you wanted to get across, and how much do you see your active practitioner, when you talk about your experience, modeling and being about this? How much is being different been foundational in your journey?
The idea of being different comes from a place where I observe the world and I watch what's going on around in every industry. Every industry is different now than it was 10 years ago, and definitely different than it was in the 90s. Everything is, I mean, my gosh, we have autonomous cars driving around on the surface of Mars. We have rockets that are landing on barges in the middle of the ocean. Everything is different now. We used to talk about how cool it would be if we could talk face to face over our phones. Well, look what we're doing right now. I mean, everybody does it, like, for Pete's sake. But what about education? And I always worry that education is that one bastion of non-change. It's almost like we were educated a certain way. Well, then that must be the way that we're going to continue to do it. Education has to change. It has to be different. It has to see itself differently. It can't be that same conversation where we're talking about over, the test and the chapters and the unit studies, and because we're talking about an era gone by. What's going to come in the future? The evolution of everything except education, and I want to kind of be that part of that puzzle of driving the change forward, to say we need to change what we're doing and the way we're doing it, and we could get into that, but I'll pause for a second, because go ahead and ask me the next question, because I want to get a train of thought going here.
Sounds good, Tim. This whole idea of being different, you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head that everything around us has been evolving, and everything is continuously evolving. And we are sort of stuck in this era when it comes to education, where things just aren't going forward. They're not. We're not changing the game the way that we see the rest of the world changing around us. And so, we're wondering, even in regards to being a driver of curriculum in teaching. So what does that term mean, and how does that play into sort of the whole educational process and how things are evolving and changing?
Yeah, well, the thing is, you have to be so careful, because there's so many good teachers out there who are doing amazing things, and education on a micro level is changing. We're seeing, and even in my school here in Langley, we're seeing fewer and fewer final exams. We're seeing more and more exit projects and research and passion projects, and this sort of thing is becoming more prevalent. Like, for instance, it used to be 10, 12 years ago, we would be moving all the desks down to the gym so that 300 people could sit in rows and write their final exam. And we don't do that anymore. So there is evolution happening. And so you always want to focus on the positive. But there's still this element of, we're hanging on to certain components of the past. And I think that the more that we can be different from that, I think the better. You see, this whole idea of curriculum driver or passenger is like, if you're going to teach something, to me, it has to be connected somehow to what's going on in students of the 21st century. We're 21 years into the 21st century now, and what's their future going to be like? And I know that we have a history of, Back to the Future, and we'll wait till 2016 and we'll have flying cars, and and things don't always play out the way the movies say they're going to. But there are things happening in the world that are, you think of big events, big scientific issues, climate change, and you think of the way our energy demands are need to be shifting, and the way we're going to move ourselves around, and how we communicate, and how we know so much. Like, nothing can happen in this world today that kids can't know about instantaneously. And are we addressing that in the classroom? Are we allowing that a place in the classroom? So if there's a curriculum that says, teach this particular element, in my case, science, then the number one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at that thing and say, well, where is that being played out right now in the world? Because these kids today are so connected. They know what's going on. And the other thing on top of that is, they're not only connected to the world, but they're very passionate about issues. They want to know why things are happening, and they want justice, and they can't almost waste their time worrying about the minutiae of, did I say that word right?
It sounded right.
Yeah, the small things of curriculum. In science, there's all kinds of small things of curriculum that, okay, well, actually I learned that too when I was in high school in the 80s. Well, I always think, why am I still teaching that 40 years later? My gosh.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on in the world today that and in the next 10 years that's going to make a huge difference in these kids' lives? And then on top of that, give them an element of hope, because these kids, they're tenuous sometimes at best. Their emotional state is rocked. There's issues of anxiety, and we need, and when they're connected to a strange world, we have world leaders who are tossing out ideas that shake our understanding of truth. We don't know what's true. Whoever is shouting it the loudest, I guess they're the ones who are right. I don't know. So we have to deal with these issues, and then give these kids an element of hope for the future. How are they going to be part of the solution? How are they going to make the world better? And when we do that, we're not focusing on the minor parts of the curriculum. We're focusing on the macro scale. I have to admit, I look at things from 30,000 feet, and I see the big picture, and I say, I know it says in the curriculum to teach this, but if it doesn't make a difference in this kid's life over the next 10 years, I'm probably not going to teach it. I'm probably going to spin it in a way and say, where that really comes up? Like in chemistry, if you want to talk to me about the combustion reaction, I'm not going to just talk about the combustion reaction in hydrocarbons. My gosh, combustion, since the days of Mary Poppins, this has changed the world and the Industrial Revolution. Let's talk about what's moving forward and how can we fix this. Kids buy into this in a huge way. They love this because they're now seeing the world and they're understanding it. And then I'm saying, and you can be a part of the solution. And they love that. They're just too aware these days that we can't ignore their understanding of the world. And so I allow the curriculum to be molded by what's driving them.
Those are some great points, Tim, because you highlight that idea that the ability to gain or access information is readily available, and that's a foundational change. And so students don't need to know or have you curate where they can find stuff. There's nothing you can't learn on YouTube in 3 seconds as long as you just want to go out and get it. So I love the fact it's about civic engagement. It's about, now that you can know anything if you want to, how do I engage with what I know? More so than just knowing it as a spectator. As I look back in the stadium, I'm not in the stadium, I want to be on the field. So now that I know something, how do I engage with it and make that learning real, or that community engagement practical? So I really love that take. We can dive back onto that content, but I actually want to dive back into your book for a second. And you talked about, what teachers could get from it. And teachers really love, you called it anecdotal, but it's a practitioner's experience. Books have many different places. And what does a teacher want? Teachers love to talk to other teachers. They want to know what was working practically. They know what data is going to tell you, but data still is generalized. Even if it's really efficient data, is that data always going to be pertinent to my particular class? There's always such value in hearing from a practitioner that can tell you, I have the data, I know it's a great reading strategy, but this is what's happened in my class when it didn't work and I was able to do this and I switched and I did that. And I think that's the value of the book as an extension. What did you get from the book? What was the value for you? What you've done writing that book? What's your own personal growth? What do you get from it internally? You're like, I'm really proud of this, or this makes me want to do this, or I feel like I've done something different. What's that internal reflection that comes from a book? Because, many teachers dive into that author space, whether it be on a smaller scale, like a blog or something like that. What's that value you get internally from being a writer, and then even extension, being an author?
Well, I think the thing I get from, I actually address that very thing in the book, where I have taken the time and evaluated what I do. I think that in teaching, there is an element of looking over your shoulder. I wonder what the teacher in the room next door to me is doing, and I wonder if I'm doing as good a job as they are. And I think the answer to that question is you likely are, because your teaching style is maybe different, but you're doing the best that you can. And as long as you have a growth mindset, which is something that we're promoting in students all the time, to not say I can't or I don't know how. Gosh, I still hear that in teacher ranks, and teachers, we need to be the example of growth mindset. So when I wrote this, I addressed this, and I said, I've thought it through, and I've considered what I've done as a teacher. Am I happy with it? I have to answer, yeah, I am, because I did my best. I always thought about the student first, and I thought about their future. I didn't think about about my past. I thought about moving them forward. I want them to be the interesting person in the conversation. I want my students to be in conversations around the dinner table at their homes and have an adult say, how do you know all this stuff? This is a very interesting conversation. Where did you learn that? I want them to say, well, I tell you, Mr. Stevenson, we talked about this in his class, and that's very interesting. We never talked about that kind of stuff when we were in school. Exactly. Of course, because things have changed. We're now dealing with bigger issues. And so I think the writing process has allowed me to really think through what I've done, and then come to a place of I'm happy with what I've done. And obviously I'm a growth mindset person. I'm always thinking about changing and how I can evolve, but I've done my best. I think of Dickie Fox from Jerry Maguire, when he says, I don't know if I've done everything right. I may have made more mistakes than anybody else, but I can tell you this much: I love my wife and I love my life, and I wish for you my kind of success. I love that quote.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And what more do you want from your rich and vibrant career than to look back and say, you've done everything. You reflect on your career, you reflect on all of your actions, you reflect on everything, and you say that, I may not have done everything perfectly, I may not have done everything correctly, but I've done enough to make an impact, and I've done enough to make an impact not only on my students, but on myself as well. And so I think that this is a really great way to highlight that. Tim, who do you think is going to benefit the most from reading this book?
Well, I think there's a couple of categories. Without a doubt, I think the ones who are going to benefit the most are the ones in the first 5 years of their career. And because there's it's a new way of looking at teaching. It's an empowering way of looking at teaching, as if to say, I can do that. Well, yeah, you can. Of course you can. You can be that creative person. You can be that person who thinks about what you're doing, and then ponder ways that it's going to have the greatest impact. Don't just do it because it's always been done. Do it your way. Make it your own. But on the other hand, there's this one section in the book where I was referring to a student I had around 2008. She was a chemistry student of mine and has gone on to just an amazing degree and doing wonderful work in the area of ocean repair. And she said how when she was out working with some of my students who are currently, she came back and mentored some of my current students, which is a beautiful synergy. I love that. But she said, boy, we never had this when I was in school. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I was one of your teachers, and you're saying, what did I do wrong? I'm sorry, I should have been thinking. And I wrote, maybe you got me when I was too young. But it's not an age thing. It's not you've been teaching for 28 years. You don't care what people think anymore. And okay, boomer. No, it's not. It's not. It's anybody at any point can say, wait a minute. we have this glorious opportunity. There's nothing more rewarding than investing life into life, and the opportunity to do things with your position as a teacher, the person who's going to influence the future. That can happen at any point. Maybe you're in a rut. Maybe you're kind of like bored. Maybe you're, I remember I heard Dave Schmittou say, he was on his podcast, he was talking to Marty Silverman, and they're saying how the average retention of a teacher is 4.2 years or something like that. Well, why are people leaving? Is it because they haven't thought this way? And if they think this way, they'll go, wait a minute, not only am I not leaving, I can't wait to get to school Monday morning because we're doing this really cool thing and I want to be there for it. That's what's happened for me. And I honestly, in my heart of hearts, want it to happen for everybody else. So I think it could be for anybody. And I think that the response I've had from people reading it is, wow, I really feel encouraged and inspired. And, people are saying, I maybe sort of stop and think, how could I do this in my class? And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted to have happen. So there you go.
You can see, everyone's going to pick something a little different from it. So for a younger teacher, you might be looking for some of the more practical applications. As you get older, you think you know it all, but you still need that motivation. I almost could even attest, as I'm older, I want peer collaboration more, and I probably even want peer validation a little more. Maybe I'm not explicit in stating it, but when I was younger, it's like, it's me. I'm on a mission. I want to be this. I want to be that. As I'm older, there's a lot less me in my vernacular, and there's a lot more wanting to connect with my fellow educators. And I think your book is just that. As a fellow educator, I'm listening to another educator. It inspires me. It gives me motivation. I can connect. So I really like that message, and that it is for a variety of different teachers, and everyone picks out something a little different on their journey. If I were to follow this up, now, once you go through your resume, what becomes next? What are you excited to do beyond this? Not that you can't enjoy this moment that you're here right now, but now that you've accomplished all these great things, where does that leave you to want to do more, to talk a little more? Would you want to write another book? Would you want to share in another format, maybe being a speaker? What goes next when you continue to make these great accomplishments? Where does Tim want to go?
Well, I've checked one of them off my list today. I'm on the Staff Room podcast. So there's number one. Okay. After this, I don't know if there's anything left. And by the way, I want to say thank you for the endorsement on the back of my book from you guys. I want to do that because I know that you guys have an influence. You talk about doing things differently. You take a couple of teachers who are kicking around and go, we had to start a podcast, and look what's happening. It's having this huge impact across the country and even across the U.S. And I see who's following you on Twitter. It's around the world. This came out of nowhere. It's because you said there's an opportunity here. We ought to do that. I mean, the two of you didn't say, well, let's table that and we'll take a look at it for 6 weeks and we'll come up with an. Yeah, you probably went out and said, well, where can I find myself a microphone and let's see if we can do this. Now, what's the Anchor? I'll get an Anchor account, and then and then off you went. And look what's happened. It's like it's the same with me. Like I'll always be thinking, like, what's next? I mean, I've got a lot of big projects going on at school. I've got another book that's I'm writing with some students. It's a children's book coming out about plastic pollution that we're gonna, and we've had it all illustrated by students. It's just an absolutely beautiful book, and it's in the process of being formatted right now. And so we'll get that published hopefully later this month. We've got a lot of big projects with the sort of the circular economy. We're big into the recycling thing, and we're take in plastics from across the country. In fact, in joint collaboration with Plastic Oceans Canada, which based on the movie The Plastic Ocean, which is on Netflix. You should check it out. A movie by Craig Leeson. Spectacular film. But we're going to be collecting plastic at our school, delivered from cleanups across the country. And they're going to be mailing it, and we're going to be repurposing it through a machine we've built into sort of second life products. Just to indicate that number one, bring awareness to the plight of plastic pollution, and then as well to this idea of there are things that we can do to solve and to mitigate the problem. But I'll keep going, but ultimately with this book, what I would love to see happen is I love the opportunity to speak to crowds. I relish those opportunities. I did a TED Talk, and I just enjoy those opportunities. You get nervous as heck, but when you're done, it's like the runner's high, right? And you sort of, I always say to my students, do the things that scare you. And I don't mean necessarily bungee jumping or parachuting, but I mean like what scares you, because you'll get the greatest feeling of relief afterwards. And in my case, it's I always look for opportunities to speak about stuff, and so I'll do Pro Ds. But boy, what a great if I could ever turn this into here, take this book, give it to the new teachers in your district, and then let's sit around a table and talk about it and see how it applies to your life and how it can help you. When I first wrote about this in the 90s, I wrote it for students, and in particular parents. Parents, here's how you can prepare your son or daughter to come to school have the greatest success. And the thing that really changed with this one is I completely changed that to be for the teacher. I said that the teacher has to be the best student in the classroom, and if they are, then you'll have a great career. So this book, originally it was for parents and students, and now it's definitely for teachers. Give me an audience. Not an audience, but give me a group of people who are wanting to just delve into this, and let's talk about it. Even at one point in the book, I said, hey, if you put your PLN together, invite me. I'd love to join and just be part of it. So that's what I'd like to do next.
That sounds great, Tim. And so if people want to invite you to their PLN, how can they do that? Where can they reach you?
Well, my Twitter account is at Astro Stevenson, and that's obviously, and then of course by email, astrostevenson11@gmail.com. 11 for Apollo 11. Neil Armstrong was my boy. He was my boyhood hero. Yeah, I wrote about that in the book as well. I mentioned chapter 12, and astronomy has always been a fascination of mine, so I'm connected to those guys.
Perfect. That's definitely a story that everyone's going to want to check out. So we will make sure that we put all of this information in our show notes, Tim. And we just wanted to say that we truly appreciate the conversation and your time. And we thank you for talking to us as part of our summer series for the Staff Room Podcast and telling us a little bit more about your book, Beyond the Classroom. It was a very enlightening conversation, and we know that our listeners are going to want to know more.
Well, that is awesome. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
We're just going to say we appreciate you giving us your time and your wisdoms and sharing sort of your journey and your path. And you've accomplished great things. And you can just hear the talking points that you give out there. Like, take on what makes you scared. Don't necessarily follow a linear path. Try to make that difference. It's inspiring work. And we're glad that we got to hear it and be inspired by you. And we're glad that our audience got to hear that as well. So make sure you grab Tim's book, because it is a practitioner's journey and inspiring.
Thank you very much, Che, and Pav, of course.
And thank you for that amazing conversation with Tim Stevenson. That was such a really insightful conversation, really looking at Tim's authoring experience and experiences as a teacher, as an educator. I really enjoyed that.
And you also really enjoyed talking over top of the music for the first time, because you looked at me and you're like, whoa, this is your time when the music goes on.
That's right. I was staring at you going,
okay, go
ahead. And then you're pointing at me going, go. I'm supposed to talk?
This is a summer series. And this was a rich conversation, but when we were listening back and going through the content, I cannot share. Or yes, I can, because we're on a podcast, so I can absolutely share. I'm going to share how much you laughed out loud at me laughing out loud during Tim's conversation.
It's the funniest, and if you laughed as well, you will know exactly what point I'm talking about.
It's just my only reaction when we talk about being a Prime Minister's Award winner. Is I can laugh and appreciate, and in the same moment say, it's not ever going to be me.
It was the most self-deprecating laugh ever. I loved it. It was fantastic. So thank you for that little bit of comic relief.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining the Staff Room Podcast, joining the drive, visiting cheyandpav.com, and just helping Pav and I mutually grow with you in this space collectively.
That's right. And you help us grow by providing us with some great reflections on our episodes or on the drive. So please check out cheyandpav.com/blog to see other people's reflections and reactions to some of our episodes.
All right, Pav, let's get back to those waves.
Oh, I love those waves.
And you've been listening to the Staff Room Podcast, the Summer Edition.